Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Trumais, Pede Gimel, Halacha Aleph, and Halacha Beis. We're learning today Daf Chav Zayin. We're starting on Daf Chav Zayin, Amid Aleph, 2 lines from the top of the Amid by the 2 dots, by the brackets. When the Gemara is referring back to the case of the Mishnah, where someone separated Truma, wine, for wine. He thought he separated wine, and later he discovers that the part that was designated as truma is then when he discovered vinegar. And as we explained in the Mishnah, that our Tana follows the opinion that we just learned 2 daf ago, really a machlokes tanoim, and the opinion of Rabbeinu HaKadosh, of Rabbi, is that wine and vinegar are considered two completely different species, two different types, min al she'enoi minoi. You cannot separate truma not from one on the other in either direction. And therefore, there's a suffix. Now it's vinegar when you discover it. If it would have been vinegar already at the time of hafrasha, then what you did is b'chlal not effective. And so the Gemara points out that our Mishnah does not follow the Tana of Rabbi Yishmael ben Rabbi Yossi, who holds that wine and vinegar are considered one min. Emes, that lechatchila, one has to be toidem min hayafa al hora. So therefore, you can separate wine for vinegar, but you cannot lechatchila separate vinegar for wine. But even that shita holds that b'di'evet, post facto, if you separated vinegar for wine, then it's going to be effective. So again, so obviously our Mishnah does not follow that opinion. Now, what we're going to have today is something really very, very foundational, very similar to Bavli, Eruv, and Daf Memvav Amid Beis. And we're going to, God willing, have time to actually learn that piece of Gemara inside today as well, in which the Gemara here, as it does in Bavli, gives us klolei halacha, as far as when you have certain tanoim that give an opinion, there are certain tanoim that we paskin like them, as we will see, and we will see how that will be a problem, or that will actually be a solution for this psak that we are saying, that we are paskining like Rabbi or Rabbi Yochanan clearly made a statement that has to be clarified, whether we paskin like Rabbi or whether we don't paskin like Rabbi, and we'll see whether that fits the klal or whether that's a problem with the klal. We will also see that something that remained a teku in the Bavli today in today's daf is clear, as we will see when we learn this inside. Now, just one other detail that we'll have to work out in halacha aleph, and which is that in the case that we just mentioned, after you discover that what you separated is vinegar, you just don't know whether it was vinegar at the time of the hafrasha. So it's a suffix whether it was a valid truma or not. And the Mishnah says that truma v'yachzer v'yitraim, there are some other details that, even though we mentioned a little bit when we learned the Mishnah yesterday, that we're going to have to fully work out vis-a-vis what exactly is done. How do we need to deal with both of these trumas that the kohen will receive? He's going to get 2 trumas, the vinegar and then the new wine. And we will see, it's gavaldik, how everything will be worked out to its last detail. Halacha Beis, we're moving on quick already, will begin really referring back to what we started the Masechta with, and that is one of the rules after the Mishnah, the Masechta began that Chamisha lo yitroimu. Remember that? V'im tormu ein truma san truma. But the first Mishnah and the first Perek also gave us the big rule that a person cannot separate truma. It's part of the 5. You cannot separate truma if something is not yours. Toirim al she'ena shaloi. Unless the person sent you as a shliach, then for sure you could separate for them from their produce truma because you are their shliach. Furthermore, we learned in the Yerushalmi that we don't dafka have to use the shlichus, but we can also have the concept of consent. That if we discover now that the owner consented with what you did, as the father with the son, we already had details we learned before, in certain circumstances, one will be able to separate truma. Okay, and now our Mishnah will say gavaldik. You have 2 partners, Reuven and Shimon. Reuven separated truma for everything. Shimon, not knowing what Reuven did, again separated truma for everything, meaning not only for his part, for his partner's part. You get it, Aviv? So let's say there's 50 sa. If I would be the only owner, I have to separate 1 sa, which is 2%. But me and you are partners. I on my own separated 1 sa for me and you. You don't know what I did. You separated 1 sa for you and for me. So we're going to have in the Mishnah 3 opinions. Rabbi Akiva, Chachamim, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Akiva will work out to all the details, God willing. The Chachamim will work out to all the details. We're going to read Rabbi Yossi, and Rabbi Yossi is not explained in the Mishnah. And God willing, tomorrow, in tomorrow's class, on Daf Koyach, we're going to elaborate the Shita of Rabbi Yossi. Just one other detail that we will also have at the end of today's daf, a scenario where a worker separated truma without the knowledge of his employer, not a partner. It's very different. And you would say, well, a worker who was not asked to do that, l'chu'ura, he was not made into a shliach, he doesn't have any balabatashkeit, he has no ownership in anything. Nevertheless, the Gemara will give you a case where it's the Chachamim said, the owner for sure consented. And as we will see in the Yerushalmi, that it's not that shlichus is the only vehicle which will allow me to separate truma for you, but if there's clear consent, even if there wasn't an official appointment of shlichus, there also I could do it for you. That will be the topic of Daf Chav Zayin. And without any further ado, it's Mamish Gavaldik. We're going to be learning many different things today. Again, Daf Chav Zayin Amid Aleph, 2 lines from the top of the Amid, referring back, right? You see the brackets, Hatchoidim, Chavi Shal Yayin, and later you discovered that which you were mafresh is vinegar. You have a suffix, etc., etc. All of that is predicated on the yisoid that if we were to know bevadai that at the time of the separation, that which you separated was vinegar, then it's not truma. And again, that's only the shita of Rabbi Shmuel, but Rabbi Yossi clearly says, we had this 2 daf ago, we had a brisa, he says that, no, truma, right, wine and vinegar are the same min. Eloma, wine is yafe and vinegar is ra. Okay, so first of all, lechatchila, you could separate from wine and vinegar. And b'di'eved, even from vinegar and wine, not like our Mishnah. Who do we paskin like? Rabbi, which is also our Mishnah stam, Kishitas Rabbi, or Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yossi. So there are 2 versions what Rabbi Yochanan said, one the opposite of the other. Which is, Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that halacha kedivrei Rabbi. In other words, let me say these words, shnei minim, wine and vinegar are considered 2 completely different types. You may not even b'di'evet separate, not even from wine and vinegar. Rab Chia says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, the opposite. That when he learned this Mishnah, Rabbi Yochanan didn't say halacha kedivrei Rabbi. He said punkt fakert. He says, our Mishnah is only Rabbi. When someone makes that statement, that our Mishnah is only Rabbi, what he's implying is, we don't paskin like our Mishnah. We don't paskin like Rabbi. Our Mishnah is Rabbi. He said the Rabbi he. Look inside the Maraful, the 5 lines from the top. Meaning, Rabbi Yochanan made a statement. You have to not only hear the words, you needed to hear the tone of what he said. That's why I can mamish see how 2 Talmidim had an opposite understanding of what he said. Because the words are not everything. It's the way you say it. He understood when Rabbi Yochanan said the Rebbe, he understood from Rabbi Yochanan that Masnis and Rebbe, the Mishnah is Rebbe. Abel Rabbanan, really Rabbanan is not Rabbanan Aviv. Rabbanan is Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yossi, B'Shem Aviv. But it sounds like everyone agreed to that. Everyone followed that opinion. And the halacha kerabbanan. So now we have a machlokes between 2 Talmidei Rabbi Yochanan, what Rabbi Yochanan opined halachically regarding this machlokes, which is very halacha l'maisa. Is wine and vinegar 1 min, or are they 2 different minim? Okay. The Gemara is going to ask a question which will be on both versions. Even though the Gemara only words it on one, but the Marafulda and the Rashirilio, they all understand the next comment that we're going to challenge no matter what you understood in Rabbi Yochanan, I got a problem with it. Who asked the question? Rabbi Bar Kohen asked in front of the Amoira Rabbi Yossi. It gets confusing over here. All right. The Tana Rabbi Yossi is Rabbi Yossi Bar Chalafta. Right. No, the Tana Rabbi Yossi is Rabbi Yossi Bar Chalafta. Why is Danny shaking his head? The Tana. Now we're speaking about an Amoira. The question is, who is the Stam Amoira Rabbi Yossi? It's either Rabbi Yossi ben Abzavda or other. Okay, but just the Tana and the Amoira. He says, how can you say that? How can even again? He's asking on Rabbi Chia. He's really asking on Rabbi Chia and on Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha, as I'll explain. Didn't Rabbi Chia say in the name of Rabbi Yochanan as a rule? Whenever Rabbi, now this is so important. Either Rebbe v'chavei Rav or Rebbe v'chavei Roi. Aviv, what's the difference? Chavei Rav is in the plural. So there's rules. Whenever Rebbe argues with Chavei Rav, would means that even if it's Rebbe against everyone else, even if it's Rebbe against the many, or no, and we're going to go with this version, when it's Rebbe against one colleague, which is our case. Who's the one colleague? Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yossi. B'shem Rabbi Yossi, but it's still Rabbi Yossi the Tana. Rebbe, minimally, v'chavei Roi, who was the halacha like? Halacha kerebbe. You got the kasha. No, it's how can you, Rabbi Chia b'shem Rabbi Yochanan, say that when Rabbi Yochanan learned our Mishnah, he made a statement through which he implied that we don't paskin like Rebbe. How? There's a klal. Rebbe v'chavei Roi, halacha kerebbe. We should paskin like Rebbe. More than that, this is also a kasha on Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha's version. Why? Why was it even necessary, according to Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha, to say, he has a version that Rabbi Yochanan said, halacha kedivrei Rebbe. Why was that necessary? There's a rule, Rebbe v'chavei Roi, halacha kerebbe. So the question really is, either it was unnecessary. Now, that's not the biggest kasha, because we know there could be exceptions. So that's why he verbalized this kasha. How can you, Rabbi Chia b'shem Rabbi Yochanan, understand that Rabbi Yochanan said that in our machlokes we don't paskin like Rebbe? Why? There's a klal. Rebbe v'chavei Roi halacha kerebbe. Ve'amar Rabbi Yoina. And furthermore, v'afilu Rebbe eitzel Rabbi Lazar b'Rab Shimon. One can answer, oh, maybe Rabbi Shmuel b'Rabbi Yossi is exceptional. Or maybe Rabbi Yossi the Tana, because it was b'shem Aviv. Well, if we know that even Rabbi Lazar b'Rab Shimon at that time, Rabbi Lazar b'Rab Shimon in our world, we're learning this in Los Angeles, is like the Rosh. Right? You had someone that's recognized like the greatest, and that was Rabbi Lazar b'Rab Shimon. And we know that this klal, that if it's halacha, if it's Rebbe against one, we always paskin like Rebbe. That's even if the other one is Rabbi Lazar b'Rab Shimon. So that's called a kal v'chomer. If Rabbi Lazar b'Rab Shimon, that's considered to be that he was considered to be the greatest of that time. But there's a klal halachi kerebbe vadai Rebbe and Rabbi Shmuel b'Rabbi Yossi b'shem Rabbi Yossi vadai halachi kerebbe. So either it was unnecessary for Rabbi Yochanan to say halachi kerebbe, or it's wrong for Rabbi Yochanan can say halachi kechachamim. That's the kasha. Now, before we go on, you know what? I'm going to read the Bavli soon. I'll leave you read it. Let's read it right now, because we're going to have over here a big thing. It's good to remember it. So we have over here Eruvin Daf Mem Vav Amid Beis. Okay, and there's a few shtiklach. It says the Gemara. Listen, Aviv. Try see if you can remember this. I'm talking to myself as well. Rabbi Yaakov tu Amirayim and Rabbi Zrika Amru. These are the rules. Halacha ke Rabbi Akiva mechavei Roi. Rabbi Akiva against others, one, Chavei Roi, Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Yossi and someone like Rabbi Yossi. That for some reason we remember, Nimukai Imai. Nimukai Imai means that he explained things so good that people agreed with him. Okay. Kerebi Mechavei Roi. The Gemara says over here. And I'm skipping 2 lines over here in the Bavli. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Listen to this version. Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, halachi ke Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi, halachi ke Rabbi Yossi. Ve'ein tzarech loimer, Rav Meir and Rabbi Yossi, halachi ke Rabbi Yossi. I'm going a few lines further. Rav Meir and Rav Shimon Mai, teku. I skipped a few lines because. But just remember that when the Gemara in Eruvin Daf Mem Vav Amid Beis is going through the Klolei Halacha, the Gemara ends Rav Meir and Rav Shimon. I don't know. Now let's read over here how it works. So Amalei. Now we have to resolve Rabbi Yochanan here. Begin the Tani Le Rabbi Shmuel be Rabbi Yossi b'Shem Aviv. No. Rabbi Shmuel be Rabbi Yossi was quoting what his father said. In other words, Rabbi Yossi. And v'amar Rabbi Yossi, the Amoira, b'shem Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yossi v'chavei Rav. Imagine, Rabbi Yossi v'chaveirov clearly means that even if on the other side of Rabbi Yossi is not one, many, that's a lot stronger. Halachi ki Rabbi Yossi mechaveirov. So now we got a problem. Now we got a stira like Rabbi and let's go with our gears and the Yerushalmi. Rabbi v'chaveiroi halachi ki Rabbi. But Rabbi Yossi, even v'chaveirov, halachi ki Rabbi Yossi. So now we have a checkmate over here. I would actually say not only a checkmate, if the version is Rabbi mechaveiroi and Rabbi Yossi v'chaveirov, then Rabbi and Rabbi Yossi, maybe we should pass on like Rabbi Yossi. Oh. Deloy tisbar lememar uf hachekain. So therefore you would think that over here we pass on like Rabbi Yossi, because Rabbi Yossi trumps even many against him. L'chein tzricha memar halacha ki Rabbi. So there's a big chiddush in saying that halacha ki Rabbi. And let's go again. The Manah folder, we're answering both sides. I'll read it inside the Manah folder, around 14 lines from the top. That for Amar Rabbi Yechanan, the chol lechet the plige Rabbi Yossi im chaveiroi. He has a different version. Rabbi Yossi v'chaveiroi halacha ki Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi v'chaveiroi halacha ki Rabbi. So now we have a problem. Hilkach tzarich loimer either. According to the version of Rabbi Yaakov Baracha, there was a need to say halacha ki Rabbi. Furthermore, says the Manafulda, Gam Asi Shapir, according to the other version, which is Rabbi Chia B'Shem Rabbi Yechanan, that he paskint ein halacha ki Rabbi, it also works. Why? Because he's not going against Chaveiroi of Rabbi. He's siding with Rabbi Yossi. He's saying that if it's Rabbi always wins against his colleague. Rabbi Yossi always wins against his colleague. Okay, now you have Rabbi and Rabbi Yossi. So that's a gewaldige thing. And for that, according to the second version, he's saying Rabbi v'Rabbi Yossi halacha ki Rabbi Yossi. So it's not that ein halacha ki Rabbi. It's not halacha ki Chachamim. It's halacha ki Rabbi Yossi. This is gewaldig. And now says the Gemara Rab Ze'era. See, we have in the Bavli it was Rabbi Yaakov and Rab Zreika. Here we have Rab Ze'era and Rabbi Yaakov. So in the Bavli it says Rabbi Yaakov. It doesn't say who. This is probably the same one. But Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi, b'shem Rabbi Yechanan. At some point, we should make a map of all of the Tanoim, all of the Amoraim. I know we did it many years ago. Someone found a good map and he put it on our chat. Push it to see what Tana, when were they born, when did they pass away, where did they live, who were the Rebbe, who was the students. You get the whole picture like this. These are the rules. Let's hope we remember it. Rav Meir v'Rav Shimon, halacha ki Rav Shimon. Ironically, the Gemara says in Bavli, that since Rav Meir was so wise that his chaverim were unable to go down to the depth of his understanding, so on one hand, they acknowledged he was the deepest. They acknowledged that. But they didn't understand it. And Torah, the psak of Torah has to be according to the mind, to the best of our ability. Of course, with Siyata Deshmaya, of course, but you have to understand, it has to come all the way down into the Chabad. So it's amazing how sometimes when someone is Oiber Chacham, I'm just saying to learn something from it. Now, Rav Meir was not an Oiber Chacham. Rav Meir was the Emes Chacham. They couldn't understand him. We don't paskin like him. So Rabbi Yehud, Rav Meir and Rab Shimon, halach Rab Shimon. Rab Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda.
I always wondered if it's so great, how come they could even say that he's a chacham?
I'm with you.
If they don't understand,
that's something we have to grapple with. I'm just quoting the words. Ein chaveda yoyred l'soif datoy. I think those are the words.
Yeah, but you know what? Just to put on the side, right? We say that halacha is like a stam mishnah, and stam mishnah is Reb Meir. So just if you really want to be messed up, keep that in your mind, and then you'll be completely
make a
confused.
Good point. And all the mishnah, everything is Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva. Okay, at least in the Bavli, we begin by saying halacha ke Rabbi Akiva. Ke Rabbi Akiva mechaveiroi. Okay, good. Now, Rabbi Shimon Rabbi Yehuda, halacha ke Rabbi Yehuda. Everyone knows this kasha. We spoke it out in the Bavli because many people here are very familiar with Hilchas Shabbos. We can learn more. But in Hilchas, in Shabbos, we have a few arguments between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon. Right? And I'm just for the record that in the Alter Rebbe, sometimes we paskin like Rabbi Shimon by Shabbos. Davar she'ein eschaven is muter, not aser. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's aser. According to Rabbi Shimon, it's muter, unless it's a psik reisha. So just that we spoke this out, that since by Shabbos the Torah says Meleches Machsheves, and the reason, the difference between Rab Shimon and others, specifically Rab Shimon is Rab Shimon Bar Yochai. Rab Shimon Bar Yochai is the father, the pillar of Pnimiyas HaTorah, which always looks at the deeper. And we paskin ein ladayin ela masha ein of royas. It's very hard to know what's going on in the deeper, and to start paskening dinim based on that, we don't do that. Masha ein kein by Shabbos. By Shabbos, the Torah says it's not just about the external what you do; it's about the kavanah that you have. So since the Torah gives so much chashivus to the machshava by Shabbos, that's why it's possible at times to paskin like Rab Shimon. Let's go right. The ein tzarich loimer. The Ein Tzarech Loimer, Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, halacha ke Rabbi Yehuda. What's the Ein Tzarech Loimer? It makes sense. Because since Rav Meir and Rav Shimon, halacha ke Rav Shimon. Rav Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda, halacha ke Rabbi Yehuda. In other words, if A is greater than B and B is greater than C, then A is greater than C. This works. Okay. The other version won't work. This version was B'Shem Rabbi Yochanan. The other version is Rabbah and Rabbi Yaakov Baridi, same B'Shem Rabbi Yoinasan. And here they said something different, and there's something missing. Okay, the first version, again, like I said, A is bigger than B is bigger than C. So therefore, the Ein Tzarech Loimer, A is bigger than C. Now, listen, see how the logic is not a logic. Rav Meir and Rabbi Shimon, halacha ke Rab Shimon. So the first statement is the same. You have to halt kapchev. Rab Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, Rav Meir, that was according to Rabbi Yonasan, that's the second thing. Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, halacha ke Rabbi Yehuda. The Ein Tzarech Loimer, that if you have both Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda on one side, and you have Rab Shimon on the other side, then halacha ke Rabbi Yehuda. We're missing something. We're mamash missing something. In other words, Rav Meir and Rab Shimon, we say halacha ke Rab Shimon. Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, halacha ke Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, but you know the Ein Tzarech Loimer, that if you have Rav Meir and Rabbi Yehuda on one side and Rab Shimon on the other side, we say that halacha ke what ke Rabbi Yehuda. Where do you see that? You don't see that. Now I want to say something like this. No, but we never said before that Rabbi Yehuda and Rab Shimon. You know, it's according to the first version. We said Rab Shimon and Rab Yehuda, we put them together. Halacha ke Rab Yehuda. Rav Meir and Rab Shimon, you get it? Halacha ke Rab Shimon. So you build up, it comes that Rav Meir and Rab Yehuda, halacha ke Rab Yehuda, it works. A is bigger than B, B is bigger than C. Here, there's something missing over here. Now, I want to say like this, that we're speaking about one against the other. One can say, if it's two against one, then the two win against the one. But you can't say the Ein Tzarech Loimer. The Ein Tzarech Loimer has to do with the characters, with the people. All we know is that if it's Rav Meir and Rab Shimon, who's greater? Rab Shimon. Rab Shimon is greater than Rav Meir. If it is Rav Meir and Rab Yehuda, halacha ke Rab Yehuda. Now, who's greater, Rab Yehuda or Rab Shimon? I don't know. Rab Shimon wins Rav Meir, and Rab Yehuda wins Rav Meir. Between those two, I don't know. So to say the Ein Tzarech Loimer, since it's two against one, or we don't see that. We're missing something. So we have to understand that what did we miss? Umina at Shama. That there was another statement that was made that was forgotten, and now we're remembering it. That Rabbi Yehuda and Rab Shimon halacha ke Rabbi Yehuda. In other words, if Rabbi Yehuda and Rab Shimon halacha ke Rabbi Yehuda, so if Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Meir are together, Vadai, halacha ke Rabbi Yehuda. Even that is difficult to understand. In other words, I don't even need Rav Meir with him. Rabbi Yehuda and Rab Shimon, halacha ke Rabbi Yehuda. The fact that Rav Meir joins doesn't make Rab Shimon win. You know what's the Havamina? Rav Meir and Rab Shimon, halacha ke Rab Shimon. So don't tell me since Rav Meir is against Rab Shimon will win even against Rabbi Yehuda. No, because Rabbi Yehuda and Rab Shimon, halacha ke Rabbi Yehuda. These are the klal. Now, what did I wanted to point out with this? That in the Bavli, Rav Meir, I'm reading again, Eruvin, Mem Vav Amid Beis. The end of the sugya. Iboyeluhu Rav Meir v'Rav Shimon Mai. Teku. What do we have according to Rabbi Yonason? The first thing that he said, Rav Meir v'Rav Shimon, halacha Rav Shimon. And that's consequential. Guys, this is consequential. We just never learned this in yeshiva all the way to the end. In other words, at the end of, I think of Masechta Shabbos, Masechta Barachas, I think, in most Gemaras, you have Klali Hashas, Klali Halacha. When I was very young, one time I had an elder bacher that went over it with me. I think I saw it at the end of Masechta Barachas. About all of the, like, how do you come to the halacha? These rules from the whole Shas they bring together. And when people remember everything, and they remember who said what, and you remember the klalim, it gives you a mahalach of how to begin. Now, there are many exceptions, say that, but at least you have the rules.
So this is a machlekes, Yerushalmi and Bavli?
You can't say a real machlekes because the Bavli is not saying the opposite of the Yerushalmi. The Bavli is saying that I don't know what to do if it's Rav Meir and Rav Shimon. I don't know. Now,
Rabbi Yonason knows.
Because in other words, they didn't have this version. Not they figured, they didn't know. Thank you. Whoever made this is great. All of these charts. Yeah. Maybe they didn't have, they only had Rabbi Yechanan. Ironically, Rabbi Yechanan was from Eretz Yisrael. I don't know where Rabbi Yonason lived. And it's amazing that at least the Rabbi Yaakov Baridi is the same Amoida. There's that which he said B'Shem Rabbi Yechanan, and that which he said B'Shem Rabbi Yonason. B'Shem Rabbi Yechanan, he never spoke about it, Rav Meir and Rav Shimon. We don't know. It's amazing how Rav Shimon, Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Shimon, all like Rabbi Yehuda. Because Rav Shimon is not halachically followed. Rav Meir is also not halachically followed. So if you have two people whom you don't follow, what do you do amongst them?
It'd be really cool to see the Pneumius stuff for all of this.
The premise of all this is based on this Rebbe said this, is that whoever yoided l'soich dati, whoever saw deeper, let me word it this way, Gabriel, people that have vision to see what's hidden are not normally meant to reveal it. It's supposed to be hidden. Halacha is the revealed. Halacha is the way it is. It's haniglois v'hanastoris. It makes sense to me. Many people now that you see the hidden, it doesn't mean that it's not hidden. It's something that's hidden. You're seeing the unseeable. It's not meant to be seeable. Okay, now let's go weiter. So we spoke weiter. Let's go to the case of the vinegar and the wine. So you have a suffix. Our Mishnah follows Rabbi, whether halakha is like him or not doesn't matter, and therefore truma v'yachzer v'yitrin. So what happened over here? I had 50 liters of wine. How many liters did I take the first time? 1 liter. Now this 1 liter is vinegar. How many liters do I have left? 49. What's 2% of 49? Vlad is here. Yes, 2% of. No, less than 1. 0.9. Now I take 0.98. Vlad says he's probably right. 0.98, and I separate it again. Okay, the coin got both. So the imsafik truma v'yachzer v'yitrei. So now the Gemara wants to know keitzar hu oisem. So let me go like this. The owner, let me tell you what the Gemara knows, and let me tell you what the Gemara doesn't know. What we have to talk out. The owner vadai cannot consume either of them. Why not, Aviv? Because one of them is truma. You don't know which one. My question is, does the owner have to give both of them free to the coin? I'm the owner. I only have to take off 2%. I don't know whether the first one was valid or not. Now, if it wasn't valid, then it's mine. It's vinegar. We said yesterday, the vinegar has to be tithed. Okay, the vinegar has to even have truma removed. I get it, but I don't have to give it to the kohen. Bechinam. I cannot eat it because it might be truma. One of them is truma. I don't have to give both for free. So keitzad hu oisem, I can charge for one. But noise, I have to give both to the kohen because I cannot do anything with them. However, the kohen has to pay for one. The kohen cannot claim both for free. One of them is not truma. Question is, which one does he pay for? Is it the megidol mektanam? Ironically, the Demei Gedoyla happens to be vinegar. The Demei Ketana is yain. So I don't know if the Gemara is talking about for the larger in quantity, or the Gemara L'chura really means the one that's more expensive and the one that's less expensive. I don't know why we call it Gedoyla Ketana, but okay. Maybe the wine, if the wine is not Shira wine, if wine is Stam Kedem wine, maybe vinegar is better than that wine. You have to know. Vinegar from Shira wine is more expensive. So the Megadoila, it fits. Megadoila Ketana. So the Gemara says that I know. How will I know that? Min man de taninan, from that which we learned in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah gave another Hechatimsa, that both of these Trumois fell into the same Chulin. And now we have Meduma. I'm not going to go over the whole Mishnah. We learned that yesterday. But even though the Mishnah says now that it's not a suffix, if it's a suffix, it's batal b'roiv. But now that both of these trumas fell into the same chulin, now you have to follow the rules of the ratio of 100 to 1. But the question is, you only have to have 100 against one of the two. And which one? The Mishnah says, midamois kiktana shebishneim. In other words, since the din of the need of 100 against one is midrabanan, when it comes to what? To uncertainties, to sveikos, b'dina derabanan, we always decide leniently. So in the Mishnah's case, leniently will mean that you only have to have 100 times chulin against the smaller one. There it's in quantity, because we are wanting for it to become batal. Once it's batal, it's better for the owner. So since, bottom line is that whatever the leniently would be, we dafka go lekula, turning to daf chav, zayin, amid beis on top before we go to the next topic. So from there, hada amra, I'm going to respond. I'm going to know. Vadai, the owner can't have either. Vadai, he can charge to the client for one. The question is, which one will he get? He's going to get the more valuable one. Lekula, the me gedoyla noisenloi. In other words, the owner cannot prove that the larger one or the more expensive one is vadai truma. He cannot prove that. Since he cannot prove it, who can eat it? Only the kohen.
When you're saying the owner can't prove it, the kohen can't prove it.
The kohen. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's what I meant. The kohen cannot prove it. So the owner has to give both. He can charge for one. Since the kohen is the recipient, it's on the kohen to prove. You have a suffix. Same thing. Lekula will mean the kohen has to pay for the larger one, for the more expensive one. Beautiful. Okay, now moving on to the next Mishnah. There's a lot of details here. So Nachama, I cannot separate truma for you. We don't say stam that Zachac la'adam shaloi b'fanav. Why don't we say that? One logic behind that will be because Aviv, even though you have to separate truma, if I separate truma from your produce, for your produce, without you asking me, that which I separated is no longer yours. I'm taking something away from you. Even though you would have to do it, it's not a pure Zachac la'adam. So that's out. Adarabba, in Bavli, clearly one of the sources of shlichus, right, in Kedusha in the second chapter, is from truma. It has to be ma'atam b'nei b'ris. We also learned in the Yerushalmi that it doesn't only have to be mitzat shlichus. I want to add that in to better appreciate it. We also learned about a son doing it on behalf of the father, that if there is consent from the owner, even if he did not formally appoint a shliach, the separation is a separation. On this yisoid, you'll appreciate the Mishnah. The case of the Mishnah is you have two partners. They own everything 50-50. The two people that are observant Yidden, they have, again, let's go with my 50. They have 50 saw of wheat. If I would be the only owner, I would separate one to give to the kohen. It's Reuven and Shimon. Reuven went ahead from goodwill. He separated one for him and for Shimon. Shimon didn't know that. What did Shimon do? Aviv, you need coffee. Shimon separated one for Shimon and Reuven. They both, what do you have now? You have two saw. What do you do with these two saw? Three-way machlokes. Two will explain today and one will explain tomorrow. Says the Mishnah. Hashutafim shetarmu zeh achar zeh. Rabbi Akiva oimer, now that we began our whole klali halacha, Rabbi Akiva v'chaveiroi, halachi ke Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says, in the Yerushalmi, Akiva spelled with a hey, and in the Bavli, Akiva spelled with an aleph. Okay, Can you do it? The Hagdama of the Sefer Or Zeruah Latzadik. When that Rav wanted to know how do you spell Akiva and I get, so he had a dream and he woke up and he had a Shailas Cholim, and under his pillow he found the pasuk. What did I just say? Or Zeruah Latzadik Kol Yishrei Leiv Simcha Soifa Tevis Reb Akiva, and Simcha ends with the Hey. Okay, anyways, so Rabbi Akiva Oimer like this, guys. Halkop Truma Shneim Truma. Now let me tell you what he means. Today we'll learn Rabbi Akiva. Number one, Aviv, listen to my words. We don't say that Shimon consented with Reuven. He never asked him to do it. We don't say that. Since we don't begin with the presumption that Shimon consented, no shlichus, no consent, therefore, when Reuven separated one saw, only half of the saw is a valid separation. He owns half. The other half is not. Now let's work this detail out, just to know. So what do you have now from Reuven separation? Half is imbued with the Kedusha of Truma. Half is Chulin. It's not even Batal Beroiv. This is a classic case of Meduma. What will be the din of Meduma? Just to know the balagan that this Reuven made with the best intentions. All of it has to go to a Kohen. Half of it is for free. And the other half of this saw, the Kohen has to pay for, but he gets a discounted price because when Truma is sold on the market, it's cheaper than Chulin because less people can eat it. And the same thing is with Shimon's. In other words, we don't presume anything. Unless one shutef was megala das that I want you to do it for me, no. So each one separation, when he says that the Truma Shneim Truma, just to know, Rabbi Akiva doesn't mean two saw. That's ridiculous. He means that half of each one separation, you get it, is Truma. And now we have two mixtures. And like I just explained what you need to do. Okay.
Rabbi.
One more detail. The other detail is that now that the Kohen has that saw, he has another problem. What's the other problem for the Kohen? That when a Kohen gets Truma is completely mesuken. The Kohen eats Truma. Since half is, you can't say completely Tevel. Why not? Because Shimon also separated Truma. In other words, whatever is not Truma in the saw of Reuven was Trumad by the half a saw of Shimon. So Truma doesn't have to be removed. But you know what has to be removed? From the half and from the half? Ma'aser Rishon, Ma'aser Sheni. From where will the Kohen remove it? Not from it. Why not? Because maybe when he's taking off something from Ma'aser, what he's taking is from the Truma Shabai. He can't use Truma from Ma'aser Rishon. So he's going to have to take other Tevel meaning Tevel to Ma'aseris, and from there, be Ma'aser Mimarka Macher. Now we worked out Rabbi Akiva. Just remember, you have to always remember this. This is what happens when you have a mixture of Truma and Chulin. All of these steps have to be followed. Now,
Rabbi, did you clarify just in terms of a perspective when you talk about the owners, the partners? How does it actually? Do they both own everything? Like every single bit
so that's a
partly owned by
we have in
both?
Babli, Bava Basra over there, and the two general opinions is either that each one owns part of everything, or each one has only half. We just don't know which half belongs to whom. And you can always, the Achreinim for sure will bring this Mishnah, and you can make an argument that that's underlying the Machlekes Rabbi Akiva and the Chachamim. Could be. But let's learn the Pshat. Very good. Good connection. The Chachamim disagree with Rabbi Akiva. Why? Listen to the words. The Chachamim hold that we have a halachic presumption. Shimon is a Truma Jew. Shimon knows that everything here has to be Trumad. What did Reuven did bad? Anyways, they're partners. It's not a stranger. I get it. By a stranger, you have to have shlichus. By a stranger, you have to have some gilui das. Partners are not that way. Maybe let's add the words that Danny just said. That really everyone owns part of everything. So there is some balabatishkeit.
If I own everything, so I should be able to be term everything.
Very good. But let me there is a presumed consent. There's a presumed consent. So therefore, just to know, it's very clear. So if that's the case, whichever one did it first, when Reuven gave a saw, everything is already mesukan from truma. And now that Shimon gave another saw, what Shimon saw, he said it's truma. That statement is meaningless. I know there has to be meiser, that's something else. The first one is kuloi truma, and the second one is nothing. Beautiful. That's the chachamim. That truma sorisha in truma, and there's no meduma, and everything is shalom al Yisrael. Simple. Rabbi Yossi will leave for tomorrow. The words of Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi yomer depends. Im tarem harishan kashiur. What is the shiur? There's a certain quantity that we'll leave for tomorrow. If the first one did it exactly in that quantity, not more, not less, then we say, then Rabbi Yossi will say that like the Chachamim, that Shimon consented, and therefore ein trumas hasheni truma. Aber, unlike the Chachamim's blanket statement that there's always a consent from Shimon to his partner, one for the other, and whoever did it first is completely valid, his separation is perfectly valid. No, that if there is some sort of deficiency, or minus or plus, we'll see tomorrow, Im loitadam arishan keshir, then trumas hasheni truma. Then we're going to use this like Rabbi Akiva. Then Reuven had no permission from Shimon, and therefore, again, what he separated, half is truma, half is chulin. What do you do with it? The whole thing goes to the coin. The coin pays for half bezoil, and then the coin has to deal with the meisres on the other half, and v'chein l'Shimon. Okay, so that's clear. Now we're going to go weiter in the Mishnah, understanding that the Mishnah is saying "Bamed dvarim amurim," like the Marafulda says. We're going now on Rabbi Akiva. When do we say Rabbi Akiva holds that there is no presumed consent? That's only Bisheloi Diber. Who is the Medaber? That's when Reuven, the first one, all right, never heard from his Shimon that you can do it. So, in other words, he never verbalized any type of consent. So we don't presume there was consent. Aval, however, Hirsha, now, the way we're going to learn Pshat, Hirsha to his partner, that means the partners said to each other, guys, we give each other permission to separate. He said that. Or not only by a partner they already own. And maybe each one owns everything, so it's easier. Hirsha doesn't mean shlichus. They gave permission. I'm good if you do it. Even ben beisai, even avdai, even shevchasai, if they make such a consent, now trumasai truma. More in the Gemara, like almost like pshita. It's not such a pshita, but that's the Mishnah. Okay. Now let me ask you a question. This concept of hirsha, I give permission for you to separate. Just like by every shlichus, the mishaleach has the power to revoke a shlichus. Not only does the mishaleach have the power to revoke a shlichus bifnei hashliach, but even when he sent a shliach out of his door for anything, even for Gittin and Kedusha, right? The most serious thing. And after the shliach is on his way, shliach la'yalacha, if the man says, if he makes a statement, I remove my authorization, then the person is no longer a shliach.
I revoke it. The Mishnah's point will be that the revocation of shlichus only is effective forward, never retroactive. We don't say that if you revoke a shlichus, you undid it lemafreya. And therefore, bitel, if the owner, even after the shliach left, that's important. Not only bifnei hashliach, he left. In this case, he went to separate truma. The owner says, very good, Danny, I am withdrawing my authorization. Says the Mishnah, if he made that declaration prior to the shliach's execution of his agency, then what he did is not valid. Ain't truma say truma. But if the shliach did what he was told to do, then it was revoked. We don't say lemafreya. Okay, it's revoked, mikano lahaba, and therefore what he already did prior to the revocation will stand. Truma say truma. Furthermore,
now that we established that you have to have a consent, and more than that, even the Chachamim in our Mishnah only say that there's a presumption of consent by partners. That implies not by workers. Oh, so in other words, if you have a worker, if there wasn't a verbalized consent, a worker cannot separate Truma on behalf of his owner. The Mishnah will give you one exception, and let me just say it by heart. And that is like this, that it was common. We already learned this a lot in Masechtas Demai. Bisman Bayesheni, the majority of the people were coined as a Am Ha'aretz, Amaratzim, which means that they were not so knowledgeable and not so careful in the laws of Tum and Tara. And because of that, the Chachamim said that Stam and Am Ha'aretz has a status of someone who's Tamei. When you harvest grapes for wine, another detail, even though normally food, after it's disconnected from the ground, at first has to become mukhshar l'kalbal tuma. It's not so neged, just to know the emes, that the Chachamim made a gzeira, grapes that are harvested for wine are automatically mukhshar from when they are harvested off the tree, for whatever reason. Which means that an Am Ha'aretz who would want to at least have truma that a kohen can drink would take precautions if he cares for him to hire only chavedim for workers, for the harvest and for the pressing. Even though our Mishnah is not speaking about the harvest, I want you to know it's also about the harvest. So whenever you have such an owner as Am Ha'aretz, and he only hires chavedim to do the pressing, what does that show? What's that megala? That he wants for the wine to be tahar. So therefore, what's the mila? First of all, many people only drink chulin betaro. But more importantly, so when you have tevel that's tahar, so the truma that's separated will be tahar, so the kohen can consume it. So there's an automatic presumption that the owner, the Am Ha'aretz, wants for the chaver to be the one to be mafresh the truma. It makes a lot of sense, because how can the owner, the Am Ha'aretz, be mafresh truma? He's going to be making it tamei. And I would even argue that chavedim charge more money. Those charedim, you could have gotten a better price. They come late, they leave early, they have a lot of kids.
Ask Gabriel how much the mashgichim cost at.
From a mashgiach. So in other words, why are you hiring a chaver? Because you want him to be toidim. That's it. So that's the mission.
That's so much mashgichim.
Hapoihalim. Normally, workers don't have permission, litraim. Even according to the Chachamim, it's only by partners. But chutz min aderoichos. Deroichos means people, chavedim, that were hired to trample on the grapes. And again, it's really also the harvesters. Why? Because the owner, if the owner, again, that's the case. The owners and Am Ha'aretz. The only workers are all chavedim. Shehem etamem esagas. Because an Am Ha'aretz will convey tuma. The owner dafke won't separate tuma. We had the same thing before by bakers, that it was common that bakers that were amaratzim, they would hire chavedim to be the dough makers. Same thing there. It's not that you don't have to harvest it, but at some point when you mix the flour in the water, now it's mukshal lekabel tuma, then you know the whole thing is to up the level of tahara. And since we have another minute, especially since the Gabi loves doing what I'm doing, so now we'll begin with the Gemara, just to open up, and we'll leave the answer for tomorrow. Asks the Gemara, frek the Gemara, man nan kaimen. Let's go back to the Mishnah that there's a whole machlokes. Does one partner consent or not consent? What is the Mishnah talking about? Ibimamchin. I know many people are using an art scroll, but let's learn inside the Pnei Moshe. The Pnei Moshe has a whole different understanding of this Gemara's point or kasha. Mamchin means partners that are constantly being moicha one and the other. It's like in a marriage. Some people are like, some couples are like this, like that. In partnerships, some partners are constantly protesting one against the other. Each one complains what the other one did. So let's look at the way they have their relationship. They didn't begin a partnership today. If these are people, says the Pnei Moshe, 8 lines from the bottom, Mamchin, that it's known that they're constantly makbid. When Reuven does something, Shimon has tainis. Shimon does something, Reuven has tainis. From the type of unverbalized agreement that what they have, that no one consents to anything to the other. Vadai, one did not have permission to do it for the other. It's a very cute question. And in that case, if they're known to be mamchins, then af Rabbi Akiva are moideh that
it's not good. You can't do it for your partner.
No, the opposite. The very crazy one for the other. He's saying the opposite, I think.
No, so in that case, you cannot be.
No. Rabbi Akiva says
partner.
that the mamchin that would go with Rabbi Akiva, fakert, the chachamim should be moida. I think if they're very makbid on one or the other. No.
And they will continue.
No.
Baruch Hashem. Wednesday.
No. If two people are constantly fighting with each other, and Reuven still did it without Shimon, he did it exact, and he did it because everyone has to take. Like when two partners are very working on eggshells, when they do something, it's vaday that they had the permission to do it. That's the way he's understanding it. Two people are contentious the whole time, then the presumption is that for Truma, since everyone knows the other one has to take off Truma, I will take off exactly the right amount. I'm not going to add anything. I'm going to do it perfect. And the other one is Vaday going to be Maskim.
Yeah, it makes sense if you go with the explanation that they're experts. If they're experts, so then you can rely on each other. It has nothing to do with fighting, right? It has to do with proficiency.
I know. I'm just saying the way the Panei Moshe, I found it cute when I was preparing. If they're fighters or not fighters, that should make a nafkamina. We'll come back to this tomorrow, and the Gemara will make a solution that we don't know whether they're fighters or not. It's not clear. They were not partners long enough. They have hard times communicating. You don't know how they really feel. It's not clear whether they are a mamchim partnership or a not mamchim partnership. Hashem should bless us not to be a non-mamchim